Yo, what's going on, you guys? This is RJ1 and I'm going to be giving you guys another new world build video. So for this build video I'm going to be giving you guys is going to be on tanking. So for the tanks out there are two different types of tank builds you would generally go for. It's going to be a light tank set and the other one is heavy. Now for light tanks, I actually would not recommend it, or if you want to get into light tanking, I wouldn't recommend going straight into light tanking. You want to definitely start off heavy first, get familiar with it, get familiar with the mobs, get familiar with the dungeons and everything, and learn how to position, because positioning as a tank is the most important thing aside from being able to survive. Now, once you are pretty familiar with tanking and you kind of understand it and you understand like your limits and everything, then go light. There's no reason to go medium because it doesn't really provide you any benefits in terms of damage. You're just better off going heavy if you're going to go medium. And if you want to actually just challenge yourself and test it out, then you can go light. But just know that light tanking is a very, very valuable, or not valuable, but a viable option in terms of tanking. But it also comes down to what the dungeons are that you're trying to tank and what sections of the dungeons, because there are going to be dungeons out there where you can light tank one section, but you cannot light tank the next section. And especially with the way the game is now, where mobs can just completely stagger you, like just with a single hit, it just makes it a lot harder to light tank. But again, you just have to get used to the positioning and get used to your limits as a tank before you can even think about light tanking. So what I'm going to do with this video, or this build video, is we're going to go over the attributes, we're going to go over the weapons and the builds for the weapons, the gear, and then obviously I'm going to speak about how to position and like whatnot, but I'm going to also show you guys some gameplay after. It's not going to be of the tank POV, you're going to see it from my perspective as a healer, but I will do voiceovers of exactly like what you should basically be doing as a tank. We did Glacial Tarn M3 on Fresh Start and got close to 90,000 points or score, which is pretty good, especially for a Fresh Start server, I suppose. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into the video. Alright, so for starters, this is generally what your attributes are going to end up looking like. 300 strength, 300 con. This is more or less the most basic way you can go about it. You technically could go less, but the reason why you want 300 con is because of the fact that you get grit whenever you're heavy attacking. And you're going to always have grit as a greatsword user. Whenever you're using greatswords as a tank, which is now the new meta for tanking, you get grit because you're always performing heavy attacks. If you feel like you want more con, then go ahead and go up to 350, because what it does is it gives you 10% base damage reduction while you have grit. So that means the damage you take is going to be reduced by 10% while you have grit active. Now, you can lower it down to 200 con, but this is pretty iffy unless you're pretty confident in your ability to just go 200 con. And there are tanks who do also go light at 100 con, and it depends on the dungeons you're doing. Obviously, like not every single dungeon you're going to be able to go 100 con tank, light tank. It just varies on the dungeons and whatnot, and I don't really know if in M3s with this current update that's something that is done. I think our tank did that a few times and we got gold in Genesis, but I think it's pretty iffy, especially for new tanks. That's not something I would ever recommend. But yeah, I would definitely go either 300 or 350, especially if you're a new tank and you're not trying to speedrun. And then for your damage perks or attributes, you're gonna generally just go for 300 strength just to keep it simple, because you're using a hammer and a greatsword or sword and shield. But if you want to get a little bit more damage output, you can drop your strength down and get to 25 dexterity, so you can have the crit chance. And then you can also just get another 25 points into dexterity, so you can have the extra 5% base damage while you have full health, which means you would be dropping your strength down from 300 to 200 and increasing your dexterity from 5 to 25. I mean 300 to 250 and dexterity from 5 to 50. You wouldn't put any points into intelligence because you're never going to be behind and you're rarely going to crit anyways. This doesn't matter because it's just even less damage as nothing scales off int for you, and then you don't need the cooldown for focus. And then you want to make sure your magnify is either set to constitution or strength. As you can see, if I go strength, I'm way over cap, but that's why I set it to here. Now for your weapons, there are a few options, but the best options for a tank as your main hand is going to be Sword of Shield and Greatsword. And then your offhand is going to generally be your Warhammer. It's typically going to be the one and only option, but then you also have the flail as well. Depends on the situation. It's more of a situational offhand than anything else. Hatchet on bosses can be okay. I mean, it's pretty nice to have for certain bosses. Rapier is pretty decent, and then spear I just would never really recommend, or great axe as an offhand for a tank, and obviously pretty much none of these is going to be needed. Blunderbuss is okay as well for a tank's offhand. Generally, if you do want a ranged offhand, you would either go hatchet or you go blunderbuss, as you can just throw the hatchet. Now for your main hand, we're going to start with the Greatsword. So this is what your stuff is going to end up looking like. If you wanted, you can actually put your last point into Adaptive Rush and take off the point from Keen Posture, or not Keen Posture, Giant Slayer. So you lose the 15% base damage against attacking foes that are above 90% health. You would lose that, which is fine, and then put it into Adaptive Rush, because what's going to happen is if you are in Defiant stance and then you take some damage, you Relentless Rush through them, you're going to heal 15% of the damage that you dealt with Relentless Rush. Obviously, it's not going to be a lot of health back, but it is more than nothing. And then on Defiant stance, you're just going to put these points in. So you need to get Perfect Vigilance because it is straight 20% damage reduction on the first hit you take when you are at full health, and it's a 20-second cooldown. You got to make sure you get all the way down to Intimidating Roar for your Rupture. You don't want Adaptive Rupture, because if you're in Defiance stance and you pop Rupture, it's just going to push the enemies away. It's nice when you pull them in, but that's not something you really have to worry about doing. So I would never do this as a tank. Make sure you get a point into Calamity Counter. You don't need these 2 points at all, just the 1 point, and then this is your main AoE taunt. And then obviously you want to have Warrior Posture for the extra armor when you're in Defiant stance, and then Blade Honing so you deal more damage, and then obviously Unflinching Blade so you apply bleed and apply grit for yourself whenever you're doing heavy attacks. So you already get grit from Unflinching Blade, but yeah, so you would go Unflinching Blade so you can apply bleed, and that way it helps you hold aggro even more. Now, if you don't want to use a Greatsword as your main weapon, you can go with Sword and Shield. Now, it looks a little weird here, and the reason why is because I'm just giving you different options, but here is what you will generally do. I'm just going to put a point there, and then let's get a point for leadership, and boom, 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 boom. Alright. And that is it. So if you do go Sword and Shield, this is generally how you'll end up going with your points. Now, if you're a light Sword and Shield, you probably want to go with Upheaval instead of Whirling Blade. But what is also nice about being light in Whirling Blade is the fact that it applies 15% rend for 10 seconds. So what you can do is you can go here, and then I want to say take Empowered Stamp. Oh no, and then you would put the point here. So this is basically how you would go about this. Well, oops, No, you wouldn't. No, yeah, you would keep Whirling Blade. What you would end up doing is you can keep Whirling Blade on for the boss fights and take off Shield Rush if you feel like the weaken is not needed necessarily. Shield Rush is generally really nice to have because of the weaken, 20% weaken, and Intimidating Rush, but Upheaval just does so much damage when you're light. And then it also can just give you cooldowns for your skills, which means you can get Whirling Blade back as well as Defender's Resolve. And now for the Warhammer spec, this is basically what you're going to end up using. The reason why I have 4 skills is because I always swap Wrecking Ball off for Armor Breaker. You need to have Armor Breaker for the bosses because it applies a lot of rend. It applies 30% rend. It's basically one of the highest rend appliers in the game. And it's a 30% rend for 10 seconds. So having this is going to be very, very noticeable versus not having it in a boss fight. And then you use Shockwave for the mob AoE stuns and staggers. But if you have Sundering Shockwave on your gear as well, it will apply rend to the mobs and the boss. Some bosses, not every boss, can be applied with the Shockwave rend because for some reason it's just buggy like that. And then you have Clear Out. So Clear Out is only useful obviously for its knockdowns and whatnot, but it's mainly useful because of the amount of rend that you can apply with Clear Out, which is like 25% as well. But you have to have Sundering Clear Out on your weapon. And then for my passives, I go with Outnumbered. So when you're surrounded by mobs and you're just spamming your AoE or your CCs, you're taking 20%, or you basically get a 20% armor increase. And then whenever you're light attacking enemies that have a debuff applied from your hammers, then you get a 7% cooldown reduction whenever you light attack them. And then Concussive Impact, so you do 15% more base damage increase against enemies affected by hammer debuffs, and you also heal whenever you use either Shockwave or Clear Out. And the debuffs that you end up applying to them is honestly like the stuns and knockdowns and Aftershock, which is going to be slow. You're always going to constantly apply slow to your enemies because you're using your abilities. Anytime you use an ability with your Warhammer, you apply slow, so you're constantly getting healed and you're constantly using the acceleration buff. And then obviously you have Wrecking Ball just to help with keeping enemies CC'd. But keep in mind, with this update, they made it a little weird with CC chaining. It's pretty much impossible to CC chain mobs now, which really sucks. But I mean, you still got to do your Warhammer job. Now for the Flail and Shield, this is basically what I run. I think most tanks do this as well whenever they are using the Flail, because you're only going to ever use it for these 3 skills. You're going to use it for Barrage, Vortex for Cleanse, Barrage to kind of like get through mobs and whatnot, and if you're running a Tower Shield, which you should be, you get Grit so you don't get knocked out of using your Barrage. And then Warding Bludgeon, which is probably the most important thing. You want to make sure you have, I forgot what the Bludgeon perk is actually called. Refreshing Bludgeon, or not Refreshing Bludgeon, but it basically refreshes your Bludgeon cooldown pretty quick, so you can like almost spam it. I think it's buggy though, again, with this season. But that is the weapons. So now let's go ahead and get to the gear. Alright, so for the gear, as you can see on the right side for YouTube build vid 2, vid 1, and vid 3, they are all relatively the same builds, but it's going to be a little different. So the pieces, the gears pieces that you're going to want to have are going to generally have Enchanted Word. It's always going to have Enchanted Word no matter what. And then the second most important perk would probably, instead of refreshing, would be health. And I mean, obviously having like Relentless Freedom if you're using a Greatsword as your main hand tank weapon. I don't have refreshing freedom or Relentless Freedom on my gear at the moment, or I have it somewhere in my storage, I just didn't go look for it. but that is something you want to make sure you have if you are using a Greatsword. Now, basically the two most important perks is Enchanted Word and Health. So that's why going for like the Azoth Crystal set in your mutations is also very nice. But the best in slot tank set is going to be the Frigid Dawn set, which the good piece I have is just my boots. And the reason why you want these pieces is because it comes with two illegal perks. You get Enchanted Word and Elemental Aversion together. You are not allowed to basically have those two perks, but with this set, you get both of those, and that's basically straight up double damage reduction in a sense. So the way Enchanted Word works, for those of you that don't know, is NPCs do both light and heavy attacks. With their skills, everything they do is either a light or a heavy attack. So having 5 pieces is going to allow you to have Enchanted Ward, or 20% damage reduction. And then having Elemental Aversion on all 4 pieces is additional, like, I can't even math right now, 8, 16, 17%, or no, 17, 18% damage reduction against those elemental attacks. So what's going to be nice about that though is it's not just like basic ranged attacks that's magic. It's any skills that the enemies do that is ranged. So it doesn't have to be a basic attack, it just has to be a ranged elemental attack. It used to be worded where it said basic attacks, but we had done a lot of testing and realized, it's actually not basic. It's literally every attack that the enemies do that's elemental. And then your heavy chest you want to make sure you have is Void Darkplate, which you get from mutated barnacles and black powder. Now, if you don't have that and you missed out, then having the Frigid Dawn set is going to be ideal then for your chest piece. And the reason why Void Darkplate is really good is because, again, it has illegal perks, Enchanted Word, and Physical Aversion, and then you just put health on it. But what makes Void Darkplate even better is the fact that it has a 20% armor increase, which is huge for tanks, for heavy tanks. But yeah, now you can only get the Frigid Dawn set though if you're doing Glacial Tarn. It has to be mutated Glacial Tarn. So right now it's mutated, and you can see here also the Black Ice Mantle set is pretty good if you do the Glacial Tarn mutation, since it comes with Enchanted Word Refreshing and Strength. So it's actually very, very nice. And so is the Amulet. Now, if you have the mutated materia, you can also buy your Frigid Dawn set from the Gypsum Kiln. You don't need to necessarily do the Glacial Tarn dungeon itself, but you can just go to the Gypsum Kiln and purchase the Frigid Dawn set as long as you have, I think it's 3,500 mutated materia. So you need to have a lot of those. You basically need to do a bunch of M3s, get yourself gold boxes, or even bronze or silver, doesn't matter, and save up so you can buy your Frigid Dawn set. Now, if you don't have Frigid Dawn, that's okay, because you can still get any gear that has Enchanted Word on it. Enchanted Word is the most important perk to have in PvE, again, because it's just straight up damage reduction. And then for my weapons, I'm using Serenity, but if you don't have Serenity, then I would highly recommend looking for a Greatsword that has either Trenchant Strikes on it, maybe Trenchant Recovery is okay, so that way you have some self-sustain, or like Enchanted, anything that can help you deal damage or survive, or at least hold aggro. So even if you have a Greatsword with Hated on it, that's completely fine. But ideally, Trenchant Strikes should be the #1 sought after perk to have on your Greatsword. So if you don't have Serenity, that would be the ideal Greatsword to have then, is a Trenchant Strikes Greatsword or Trenchant Recovery with Hated. And then for your Warhammer, you want to make sure you have at least Sundering Clear Out. As you can see, it's a 24% rend for 7 seconds whenever you hit an enemy with Clear Out. Now, the ideal Warhammer to have would be something like Sundering Clear Out with Trenchant Rend. Because that way you will just do a heavy attack and apply Rend, and then use Sundering Clear Out, and that also applies Rend. You just want to be able to apply as much Rend as possible, especially for like later in the raid and whatnot. Having someone as a Rend bot, at least you'll be prepared just in case someone doesn't have a good enough hammer for all that Rend. But realistically, just having Sundering Clear Out is all you really need. Now for your amulets, honestly, for example, the Verglass amulet that I have here is very, very good. You get this from the Glacial Tarn mutation. I would definitely say this is basically best in slot with health, divine, and protection. Those are the 3 things you would definitely want to have. On your amulet, you always want to make sure you have protection. It doesn't matter what you're doing, on what build, whether you're healer, DPS, or tank, you have to make sure you have protection, because it's just 15% damage reduction against that specific type of damage. So if you're doing Glacial Tarn this week, it's ice. You want to make sure you have ice protection on your amulet and ice gems in your gear and accessories, and so on and so on. So you want to make sure you have protection and gems matching the content that you're actually doing. Now, for your ring, there are 2 different rings you can go for. You can go for the Privateer's Heirloom, like I have here, because it comes with slash damage and hardy, and you're always going to be doing slash damage with your Greatsword or your Sword and Shield. Both of those are slash weapons. And then the 3rd perk, I mean, it doesn't really matter. I guess go with like Life Leech or something, or Leech. That would probably be your best 3rd perk on Privateer's Heirloom. But yeah, the most important thing is the slash damage and hardy. And now, if you don't have the Privateer's Heirloom, then you can always just get a ring that has like keen awareness and hardy. As long as you have hardy, that's what matters the most. Hardy on any build is the most important perk to have on your rings. And then the other option for your ring, if you already have it, is going to be the Blood Drinker. The reason why Blood Drinker would be ideal in some cases is because it applies a lot of sustainability for yourself, so that way your healer generally doesn't need to worry about you. Now, Blood Drinker used to be looked down upon for tanks because, or in certain cases, at least when you're actually tanking with the group and not just like off doing whatever, because you would lose aggro very, very quickly as a tank. But with Blood Drinker, as long as you have something that can help you keep aggro, like the Greatsword with its bleeds, or if you have Hated on a non-Serenity, that helps. And this way, your healer basically doesn't need to worry about healing you, and then can just mainly focus healing the DPSs or continue void bleeding. Now, something that can help benefit Blood Drinker is your earring. As you can see, it has Despised, Regenerating. Those 2 perks will help increase the amount of threat you're gaining as a tank. The reason why Despised is obviously because it generates 240% more threat if it's 700 gear score, and then Regenerating is going to be like a 0.55% health every second, which is going to be very good because whenever you're regenerating your health, healing yourself, whatever it is, you build up aggro that way. That's why it used to also be looked down upon for healers and DPSs to have Regenerating on their earring, because they would just sometimes steal aggro for some reason whenever they were getting healed from Regenerating if a tank didn't taunt right away. But what's nice about Regenerating and Blood Drinker is if you have Divine on your amulet, it also affects the lifesteal you get from Blood Drinker, and it affects the regenerating you're gaining from your earring. So that's why having health, divine, and protection on your amulet is pretty much best in slot. And then regenerating Despise on your earring, so you're gonna make it a lot easier to hold aggro. and then Blood Drinker is just ideal, or it'll be not ideal, but it'll be really nice, especially for your first time tanking and you're just in a random group or whatever. But if you want to do more damage, though, you definitely want to have the Privateer's Heirloom because you lose 25% base damage with Blood Drinker, which is pretty huge. But anyways, that's pretty much it. Well, not really, I guess. I forgot to go over the light set. So for the light set, you're just going to run Featherweight. And unfortunately, you cannot put Enchanted Ward on here because it comes with Refreshing and Physical Aversion, so you have to just throw on Health. And then what's nice about Featherweight is you get a higher base resistance than you would with any other light set. So as you can see, I'm at 1284 physical and elemental resistance, but if I switch to this, I'm at 1022 physical and 977 elemental, and that's because I have over 200 con. I'm at the 200. I have the 200 con point. If I was less than 200, then or like around 50, I'd be around 800 to 900 physical and elemental resistance. So that's why having Featherweight is going to be nice, because what it allows you to do is you can wear 2 pieces of heavy, or no, 1 heavy, which is what I have on my gloves, and then medium pants, medium boots, and light helmet. So you can basically have heavy on either the head, gloves, or boots, medium on head, gloves, or boots, and light on head, gloves, or boots, and then medium pants if you want to have the optimal weight and armor value for Featherweight. But now, that is pretty much it with this video. Hopefully this helped you guys out. Again, I'm going to just show you guys some gameplay footage. It's not of a tank POV. You're going to see it from the healer's POV. But again, I'm just going to say it again, like we did M3 Glacial Tarn on Fresh Start. So you're going to see it from the perspective of people that don't have the best in slot gear. It's more so about how you're supposed to tank. Like, we literally only have like the bare minimum requirements for M3s, and we still got a gold clear. We got like almost 90,000 on score with no deaths. I'm just gonna explain like how you should be pulling the mobs, how your positioning is super important and super crucial, how you should be positioning the bosses, etc., etc. So let's go ahead and look at the gameplay. Alright, so I had to turn the audio off for the actual gameplay because I realized I had music playing inside the recording. But anyways, as you can see here, our tank is pulling all the mobs and we don't have any heals. So you don't want to throw out any heals if you're a healer when the tank is just aggroing as many mobs as you can. But when you're tanking, you want to make sure you're limiting yourself to what you know you can. And since we are not super well geared and we wanted to play a little safe, we went into the corner just to kill those mobs there and so forth. So we're doing basically the same thing here. And also, just like in the previous clip, as you saw, our tank had his back against the wall. So that way it gave all of us all that space to fight. Now, if you're a healer, or if your friend is a healer, and you do a pull like this where you know there's an archer all the way back there, the tank isn't going to just run all the way to the archer because he has the clump set. As the healer, you have to LOS the archer so that way the archer can run into the clump. And then as a tank, you have to be aware that the archer is running in. So having a taunt ready or having your hammer to CC him is going to be ideal. And then here, we're just fighting one named enemy, but obviously as a tank you want to make sure you're the first to go in. And as you can see, he doesn't chase the elite, he just lets the elite come back so he can position himself. And obviously for this fight though, it's not like it really matters about positioning. If you're a healer and you have Scream, or if you're a DPS and you have some form of roots, you want to try to keep the boss or the named enemy in one spot. And if you're the tank, then obviously you want to try your best to keep the named enemy CC'd. And then here, just pretty much in any pool, always let the tank go first for the most part, so that way they generate the initial like threat, the I don't remember exactly what the word is for it, but vicinity. You want to have them have like vicinity threats. So the tank is the first one that basically takes damage. And as you can see, we're just waiting to start. And then what's going to happen is the tank is going to again position his back to the wall, so it gives the DPS and the healer, myself, more space to play around versus it being vice versa. And this boss is a little janky as well, like trying to hit him, especially if you're playing as a healer with Void Blade. Um, he likes to your Void Blade's going to end up getting you pushed through a lot. So the thing with tanking as well is you have to kind of be aware, like if you're in voice comms, you have to kind of like be aware of not just the tank, it's just everyone in general. Um, thing. Being aware of the boss's patterns. Like some bosses, obviously, like this one is very unpredictable, but it's always the same thing. So if he turns around, you know he's gonna jump and slam. If you're the tank, he's going to have certain attacks that you just cannot tank, but you're better off blocking it, or you're better off just dodging or moving away from it. So as you can see right here, we all knew that he turned around, and so we all moved. And what's going to happen here is the tank is not going to chase the boss. The boss is just going to come back to the tank. So whenever you're tanking, you never want to chase the boss. Chasing is not good because it could just mess up positioning. But I guess for like Savage Divide, that's a little different with the Mammoth boss. Well, no, because even with the Mammoth boss on Savage Divide, you generally have all melee DPSs, so the Mammoth actually doesn't charge out to anyone ranged. And we kill him pretty easily here, and I end up getting, I think I end up dying actually as well somehow. So he does another leap. And also the tank is, I think, yeah, he was running Sword and Shield on this playthrough, or this run, and then he went Greatsword after. So I ended up getting insta-killed there because my Void Blade literally pushed me in front of him right at the last second. And this is also the last boss. So as you can see right there in the very beginning, he taunts, he does like a pre-taunt. So that's something you also want to make sure you do as a tank. You can pre-taunt the bosses while they're before their health bar spawns, so that way you have the initial aggro, so you don't have to worry about DPSs or the healer drawing the aggro. So this fight can also be very tricky, just because this boss is very sporadic with his movements as well, and there's a lot of AoE that goes on too. But as you can see, the tank generally just he tries to play in one spot. If you move around too much as a tank, it puts too much stress for the healer as well as the DPSs, because when the boss moves around, or when the tank moves around too much, the boss moves around too much, making it a lot harder for the DPSs to DPS and harder for the healer to continue healing the tank. So for that, like there is also going to be situations where um, it won't matter how much aggro the tank has, but the bosses will have like um, mechanics where they just automatically aggro to other players. So they can be aggro to the healer, they can be aggro to the DPS. It's not on the tank, it's on the other players to be aware of that. And then as you can see here as well, our tank was doing a great job of trying to keep the boss from like hitting on the inside, so the tank generally stays on closer to, like, his back is at the edge of the outside. And you got to also make sure if you're if you're playing with DPSs or healers, that they just are not fighting on your side, because obviously that's just not good. But again, you just want to make sure you do not move around too much. Now, for a phase like this, it's okay to move. Just don't move. Don't run towards the DPSs or healers. The reason why I say it's okay to move is because this boss will do a lot of damage. So if you know that there's a phase where the boss is going to do a lot of damage because there's a mechanic that has to be done, such as those green orbs, it's okay to just run away and play your life. But obviously, if the healer is putting Sacred and Beacon and Orb on you and just pocketing you, then you should probably just stay within the heals, so that way you can survive a little bit longer. As you can see, the boss does 2 different moves to random people, and that's just not on the tank. And also, so with this update, they made aggro really easy to hold as a tank. A lot of times you can actually just block and still have aggro. As you can see, he's just running away because we have orbs, and we had to do a pickup and he didn't want to risk it. So he was just moving away to a completely different platform from us. And I just got messed up there because I knew that the boss was going to turn and swing, but I just dodged a little late. And then they said there's a bomb over there, but I was like, nah, might as well just kill him. He has like no health left. But yeah, that's pretty much the whole tanking experience in a sense. Obviously, like I said, it's not of my POV of a tank, but you can see the POV of the healers and see the tanking perspective that way. But that's pretty much it. Hopefully this video helped you guys out. If it did, go leave a like, comment, subscribe. If you have any questions, concerns, let me know down in the comment section. And peace.